stars are right, and that makes it time for another episode of The Whisper in Darkness. I'm your host, the Man from Lang. Thank you very much for joining me today. On this episode, I am continuing my reviews of the player cards in the Pallid Mask, the fourth Mythos pack in the Path to Carcosa cycle. This time we are looking at the Seeker cards. As you're probably aware by now, I have split up the review of this Mythos pack into 5 parts to make it a little easier to digest. There are a lot of great cards in this pack, so make sure you check out the reviews for the other cards in the other classes when you have the chance. There are spoilers throughout if you care about that sort of thing, and if you enjoy what you hear, maybe consider subscribing to the channel. So without further delay, let's see what the Pallid Mask has in store for Arkham Horror Seekers. Now, before I get to the Seeker cards in the Pallid Mask, I need to make a correction to my review of the Seeker cards in a Phantom of Truth Mythos pack. During my review of the card Logical Reasoning, I suggested that you could use it to cancel the Whispers in Your Head and Gift of Madness treacheries, all of which appear in the Path to Carcosa cycle. That was incorrect, unfortunately. I was under the impression that you could target these treacheries since you treat them as though they are in your threat area. However, the hidden keyword prevents them from being discarded from your hand by any means except those described on the card. So, unfortunately, Logical Reasoning will not work. My sincerest apologies for the error, and a big thank you to the viewer who pointed out that mistake, so I could correct it for all of you. The first Seeker card in the pack is a new skill. This is Eureka. It has Willpower, Intellect, and Agility skill icons, the innate trait, and the game text. If this skill test is successful, the investigator performing this test searches the top 3 cards of his or her deck for a card, draws it, and shuffles his or her deck. Now, when considering a card like Eureka, it's important to compare it to Guts, Perception, and Manual Dexterity from the core set, as well as the 2 other primary tutors in the Seeker class, those being Old Book of Lore from the core set and No Stone Unturned from the Path to Carcosa Deluxe expansion. The 3 skills from the core set give you 2 skill icons and let you draw the top card of your deck if the skill test is successful. Eureka gives you only 1 skill icon, but you get the best card from the top 3 of your deck. So which card is better? Well, that depends on the difficulty level of the scenario and how much you value card quality. Eureka feels like it's better suited to easy or standard difficulty, where you can often get away with committing fewer skill icons to skill tests. On hard or expert difficulty, there's a lot more variance in the chaos bag, and you need to commit a lot more skill icons to pass key tests. So the core set skills are probably better in that situation. As for card quality, that depends a lot on your deck. If you've built a deck that contains all the quote-unquote good Seeker cards, you probably don't care what card you draw if you pass the skill test. Once you're set up, most of the cards in your deck are going to be about the same value. So in that case, you can probably go for the core set skills. If you built your deck around a particular card or a combination of cards, however, then Eureka might be a better choice because it will help you dig for those key pieces of your strategy that much faster. Eureka might be viable in a Lola Hayes deck, for example, because A, Lola has a slightly larger deck size, so you've got to dig through more cards to get to the good stuff, and B, Lola can only play, commit, or trigger abilities on cards of her current role, and so the ability to look at the top 3 cards of your deck and pick the one that matches your current role, or possibly a role you're planning to switch to later that turn or next turn, could be very helpful. However, Lola does need to be a Seeker in order to commit Eureka, which means it's less flexible than the neutral skills. There's, as with most cards in this game, there is always a trade-off. If you compare Eureka to Old Book of Lore and No Stone Unturned, it seems like each of those cards was tailored to the needs of different investigators. Old Book of Lore, an asset from the core set, is a staple in Daisy Walker decks because it synergizes so well with her special ability. The ability to search the top 3 cards of your deck every turn as a free action is incredible, and it can really help Daisy or another investigator in her group set up quickly. Other investigators with access to the Seeker card pool tend to gravitate toward No Stone Unturned. No Stone Unturned is a one-shot event, that's true, but it does let you search the top 6 cards of your deck. Given the smaller deck size in the Arkham Horror LCG, searching the top 6 cards is usually enough to find the card that you need. Eureka gives investigators who want a tutor more options to consider. On the plus side, Eureka doesn't cost any resources, and it doesn't take an action to play. You can piggyback it on a skill test. However, you still need to pass that skill test, so there's no guarantee you're going to get a card, if you do commit this to a skill test. No Stone Unturned, on the other hand, is more flexible than Eureka, since you can play it at any point during your turn, not just during a skill test. It also digs 3 cards deeper than Eureka, which could be important if you're playing an investigator with a larger deck size. Again, it's all a matter of trade-offs. There is at least one investigator who will take a long, hard look at Eureka, and that's Min Taefan. Min loves her skill cards, and I think that that's the deck where Eureka is going to see the most play. If Min triggers her response when she commits Eureka to a skill test, it gains a wild icon, making it as good, if not better, than Guts, Perception, and Manual Dexterity. If she happens to pull an Elder Sign during that test, she gets to search the top 3 cards of her deck for a card, and then she gets to return Eureka to her hand, so she can do it all over again. Now granted, that's not going to happen very often, but it's pretty sweet nonetheless when it does. Seekers have received the lion's share of cards with tutor effects in this game, and Eureka gives you one more option to consider when you sit down to build your deck. I really like how the designers have been creating cards with similar effects that cater to the needs of specific investigators, and Eureka is a good example of that philosophy. You know, you've got Daisy with the Old Book of Lore. Other investigators can take No Stone Unturned, while Min may want Eureka instead. And I think Eureka is a little bit closer to No Stone Unturned than Old Book of Lore, but I think it's difficult to say which is the better card. There are pros and cons to each, and I just like the fact that players do have a choice. The second card in the pack is an upgrade for Shortcut, an event released in the Dunwich Legacy expansion. This version of Shortcut will set you back 2 experience points, it costs 1 resource, and has willpower, intellect, and agility skill icons. It has the insight and tactic traits and the game text Fast. Play only during your turn. Attached to your location. Attached location gains free action, exhaust Shortcut, move to a connecting location. I was really pleasantly surprised when I found out that Level 2 Shortcut was in this Mythos pack. I say surprised because I certainly wasn't expecting it. Level 0 Shortcut is such a fantastic card that I wasn't sure how the designers could improve upon it, and thus lead to a more experienced version. It's not a flashy card by any stretch of the imagination, but that free move can speed up your tempo and get you out of many a jam. I include 2 copies of it in just about every deck that can take it. The only problem with Shortcut is that it is a one-shot event, but Level 2 Shortcut changes that. Now an investigator can make the shortcut permanent, but only at the location to which you attach the shortcut. Ideally, you want to attach Level 2 Shortcut to a central location that's going to see a lot of traffic. Fortunately, there are quite a few locations that fit that bill. If you're playing the Midnight Masks, for example, you could attach a shortcut to Rivertown, which is about as central as locations come in this game when time is of the essence. If you're playing Devour Below, you could attach Level 2 Shortcut to the main path to speed up your tempo immensely there, because you do have to go back and forth from the main path so often. The Dunwich Legacy campaign has a lot of great targets for level 2 shortcut, including the Miskatonic Quad in extracurricular activity, the Darkened Hallway in The House Always Wins, and of course the museum halls in the Miskatonic Museum, which you've got to crisscross many times during that scenario. And don't forget about all the potential targets in the Path to Carcosa scenarios as well, including the foyer or courtyard in The Last King, the quiet halls in Echoes of the Past, or the one of the asylum wings in The Unspeakable Oath. Level 2 shortcut is an incredible bargain for one resource. In multiplayer, there's a good chance someone will be able to exhaust shortcut each turn, saving you countless actions. There are a couple of issues, however, that you may want to consider before you replace all of your copies of Level 0 shortcut. First, you really want to see Level 2 shortcut early to make sure you can play it on the right location to maximize its value. That means you're most likely playing 2 copies. If you draw it too late, you're likely going to end up pitching it to a skill test. Second, if you're playing Level 2 shortcut over Level 0, you're giving up some of the latter card's versatility. You can play Level 0 shortcut at any location whenever you need that extra move. Level 2 locks you in at a specific location, which may not be the right one at the right time. Level 2 shortcut is also a little bit more scenario specific than the Level 0 version. There are going to be certain scenarios where I think Level 0 shortcut will outshine its Level 2 counterpart. The Pallid Mask is one such scenario that comes to mind, since the position of the locations in that scenario is so variable. I feel like I've spoken a lot about trade-offs in this episode, and I think shortcut is another good example of that. Upgrading to Level 2 shortcut isn't a no-brainer. There are pros and cons to each card that players need to consider. That's going to do it for my review of the Seeker cards in the Pallid Mask. I really like the way the designers are creating cards that give players options without relegating the other card to the binder. Eureka is a new take on the tutor effect that we've seen on Old Book of Lore and No Stone Unturned. It's not necessarily better or worse than either of those cards. It simply gives players more options to consider if they want that particular type of effect. Eureka isn't a permanent like the Old Book of Lore, and it doesn't dig as deep as No Stone Unturned, but it doesn't cost any resources to play. You can also play it without taking an action, and that shift in tempo can't be underestimated. Level 2 shortcut also gives players options. In this case, they can sacrifice some versatility in the hope of generating some action advantage. There are quite a few scenarios where Level 2 shortcut could be awesome. However, there are others where Level 0 may be a better choice. Ultimately, you're going to have to weigh the pros and cons of both when you sit down to build your deck. That's going to do it for me today. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd appreciate it if you could leave me a thumbs up. It helps out the channel a great deal. Have you used either of these cards in your decks? Leave a comment down below and let me know how they worked out for you. Make sure you hit that subscribe button to be notified of when I release future content. If you need to contact me, I can be reached at manfromleng@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter at manfromleng. Until the stars are right, keep your shotgun close and your elder sign closer. Take care out there, and happy investigating.